The snows of the long night were not yet upon the north, but Winterfell lay smothered beneath a gray pall that made dawn and dusk indistinguishable. Wind worried the battlements, hissing through arrow slits and whistling between carved stone wolves that had guarded the castle for thousands of years. In the great courtyard, torches sputtered as men hurried to and fro. Some stark men, some wildlings, some fearful lords' retainers who had ridden from smaller keeps, before the Boltons tightened the noose around the ancient seat of the kings in the north. The air smelled of damp wool, horses, and the iron tang of weapons newly honed. Jon Snow stood upon the gatehouse parapet, worn cloak wrapped tight, black curls iced with rime. His gray eyes searched the distant tree line where the Bolton banners, flayed men on pink fields, drifted like cruel specters. They ringed Winterfell in an uneven crescent, siege towers half finished, mangonels under construction, and great hulking shapes of timber that would soon be rolled forward to batter the gates. There were campfires too, hundreds of them, dim orange pinpricks defying the dim winter day. Each flame was an enemy blade yet to be drawn, each gust of smoke, a small prayer answered by burning flesh once the battle began. Jon's breath misted before him. It seemed frail beside the rising columns of the Bolton fires. Beside him ghosts stirred, the dire wolf's white fur mottled with soot where he brushed the stone. He was restless, amber eyes fixed on the unseen wilds beyond the siege lines. Jon lowered a gloved hand to the great head, and felt the tremor of contained violence beneath the pelt. "Easy," he murmured. Soon enough. Outside, hidden by the frost-stiff grasslands and stands of snow-loaded pine, thousands waited for Ramsay's order to begin the storm. The Stark forces inside the walls were too few. Desperate wildlings, patched-together Northmen who had broken away from Bolton rule, manderly knights whose loyalty bent with the wind. Most were foot, poorly armored. The Knights of the Vale had promised aid, but winter roads and the Erie's distant, airy-perched nobles moved at their own pace. Jon feared they would arrive only in time to pick over the corpses. Every strategy he conceived ended with the gate splintered, the courtyard awash with blood, and Sansa once again in Ramsay's grasp. The thought chilled him deeper than the wind. A horn moaned far below. Jon leaned over the crenelle. At the base of the gatehouse a rider had come, lathered horse stamping, hooves slipping on the icy mud. The man bore no sigil Jon recognized. No moose of the Hornwoods or sunburst of the Karstarks. The standard, a seven-pointed star worked in dull silver, flapped in the wind. A second rider, tall in a cloak, the color of morning fog, carried a long pale sword across his saddlebow, its scabbard gleaming like starlight caught in ice. Jon's heart knocked once against his ribs. That sword was no northern steel, no castle-forged iron. It shone with an otherworldly sheen, and even at this distance, beneath clouded sky, the blade seemed almost alive, reflecting unfelt sunlight. Ghost's hackles rose. A low growl reverberated from the wolf's throat. Jon hushed him gently, but his own blood raced with the same wild recognition. Dawn, the legend of House Dayne, forged from the heart of a fallen star, a sword as pale as milk glass and as sharp as grief. There was only one man alive who might bear it, at least alive in song. Sir Arthur Dayne. Sword of the Morning. Dead 9 and 14 years at the foot of the Tower of Joy, if the tales were true. Eddard Stark had spoken of him only once, voice quieter than snowfall. "The finest knight I ever met," he had said. Then set his jaw and never spoken the name again. Yet the rider below, though hooded, moved with a grace that belonged to the man in those tales. He dismounted with fluid ease, handing Dawn to the standard-bearer while he paced forward alone, empty-handed towards the gate. The guards on the battlements shouted questions. No answer carried back. The stranger simply stood, face tilted upward, waiting. Jon descended the interior stairs 2 at a time, Ghost padding silently behind. In the yard, men parted. Sansa emerged from the great hall, winter mantle trailing like fresh fallen snow. Her auburn hair was hidden beneath a white fur hood, but her wary blue eyes found Jon. "Who is he?" "We'll see," Jon said, though his voice lacked conviction. He signaled the guards to haul the small postern open just wide enough for a single man. Creaking beams groaned, rusty hinges wailed. Wind knifed through the narrow gap. The stranger stepped inside. The portcullis clanged shut behind him. He lowered his hood. Arthur Dayne's hair was streaked with silver now, but his violet eyes, the rare gift of ancient Valyrian bloodlines that tinged the Danes, gleamed sharp as ever. A faint scar traced from temple to jaw, puckered white against tanned skin. He looked older, yes, but also impossibly alive. No one stirred. The entire yard held its breath. "Lord Snow," he said, voice calm, smooth as water over river stones. "Lady Sansa." His gaze swept the courtyard, the ragged defenders. "I have come to honor an oath long neglected." Jon found words. "Sir Arthur Dayne died at the Tower of Joy." "So the world believes," Dayne replied. "Yet here I stand. A sword is seldom forged from truth alone. Sometimes it is reborn from lies." He nodded towards the standard-bearer just inside the gate, still astride his horse, dawn resting across his knees. "I bring more than a promise. I bring light before the darkness." Sansa's voice trembled. "Why us? Why now?" "Because winter darkens," Dayne said, glancing south where the Bolton banners waved. "And because Ned Stark saved my sister's child when he need not have. Life is a debt requiring repayment. I am here to repay." The courtyard rang with whispers. Ned Stark's honor still cast a long shadow. Jon stepped forward. "We need every sword," he said, words gritting through the doubt in his soul. "But many inside these walls lost kin at the Trident, and you fought for the prince that burned their fields. Some will not trust you." Dayne bowed his head. "Nor should they. Trust must be earned, as dawn must be carried by one worthy. I was. Judge if I still am." He looked again at the pale blade. "But first, we break the siege." Around them men exchanged glances. Hope warring with fear. Jon sensed the spark lighting in their hearts, small but bright as the blade. That night, snow fell thick and silent, cloaking the campfires of the Bolton host. From atop the gatehouse, Jon watched torches flicker and gutters of red light crawl through canvas streets below. Black shapes moved languidly, sentinels checking roving lines, dogs sniffing the ground, bored sellswords muttering near barrels of burning pitch. Beneath the snowfall, sound was muffled, distant. Winterfell looked like a child's toy keep, dwarfed by the endless white. Behind Jon, Dayne knelt in the snow, dawn across his lap, eyes closed. Ghost paced inside the inner curtain below, uneasy, but keeping watch. "You're praying?" Jon asked. "I'm listening," Dayne said softly. "The sword is silent, but sometimes it hums with the song of steel yet to be met. Tonight it warns me of gray winds." Jon studied the man. "Even if we sally at dawn, we cannot match Ramsay's numbers. What does a single blade change?" Dayne opened his eyes, and starlight seemed trapped within. "It changes belief. A sword of legend in the first rank unmans foes, heartens friends. Fear wins battles as quick as numbers. But we will not ride alone." Jon frowned. "Ain taught." Dayne motioned for him to follow down the dark stair. They wound to the outer yard, where makeshift stables held scruffy mounts. There, with Sansa, Davos, and Tormund Giantsbane gathered around a table, mapped in charcoal, Dayne outlined a plan as audacious as it was insane. Tormund laughed loud. I like him," he said, slapping Dayne's back. "Mad as summer hair." Davos twirled a gray beard. "Risky, but bold. If it fails, we lose Winterfell before midday." Sansa's jaw clenched with quiet resolve. "And if we wait, Ramsay's engines breach the walls in a fortnight. I would rather die under an open sky than suffocate in these halls." "Then no." Jon watched her, pride and worry mingling. He turned to Dayne. "Dawn rides with me?" "She rides with the dawn," Dayne corrected, lips curling in faint amusement at his own jest. "You, Lord Snow, will ride to meet your sister's tormentor face to face. A parley. While his eyes are fixed on you, we carve him down at flank." Jon thought of Ramsay, his cruelty, his bow in Sansa's back. The parley would be an execution field if misplayed. He, Won't accept terms. He will, if the Stark bastard comes alone, Dayne said. Ramsay gloats over wolf pelts. Lure him. Meanwhile, I lead a spearhead beneath the broken north curtain where the Bolton siege line is thinnest. Their southern sellswards flee the fastest once fear takes hold. Davos traced the map. .e. We strike 2 hours before dawn, he mused. White sky, low light, good for confusion. Cut the siege chain here, here and here. Once their center buckles, Manderley's men ride from the eastern wood. Vale knights appear on our horizon at first light, like a noose reversed. Tormund's eyes glittered. And the wildlings? He tapped his battle axe. We do the stabbing while you do the dancing. We need your fury, Dayne said. Hold the choke at the south ditch. When Bolton ranks collapse, keep them from regrouping. Tormund grinned. It will be a red morn. Sansa reached across the table, her finger gentle on dawn's etched star near the hilt. It must work, she whispered. Dayne's answer was quiet. It will. Not because of me, nor the sword, but because Winterfell remembers. Stone roots run deep. Even snow will bleed if cut from its land. Hours before sunrise, Winterfell's gates shuddered open. Jon rode forth alone, a plain gray cloak over his black leather, long claw sheathed at his back. The snow swallowed hoofbeats, and mist curled from his horse's nostrils. Behind the walls, hidden by the barbican, Dayne and a wedge of 50 mounted knights from the southern reach waited in silence. Nameless veterans who had followed their sword of the morning into exile, after the prince fell at the trident. They wore no bright tabards, only mail darkened with ash, helms marked by thin lines of white chalk. The symbol of dawn before morning breaks. Farther north, in the Godswood Grove of Winterfell, Bran Stark dreamed. His crippled body lay nested in furs, eyes milky white, irises quivering. Ravens circled the broken tower, cawing as snow flurried higher. The weirwood's face seemed to weep red tears, sap frozen in bloody droplets. The child's mind soared with wings, sweeping over the siege, noting men's positions, counting wagons of pitch. Somewhere deep, the old magic stirred at Arthur Dayne's arrival, tasting dragonsteel and remembering nights when first men had walked beneath stranger moons. But Bran could not yet weave what he learned into the waking world. He could only watch and whisper through the ravens. Fly, fly, free. Jon reached the Bolton line unchallenged. Guards hailed him nervously. He dismounted, hands away from his sword, and waited until Ramsay Bolton himself arrived, pale eyes glinting in torchlight. The bastard of Bolton rode a red stallion, black armor lacquered, a wolf's pelt draped across his shoulders in mockery. He grinned. "Little Crow," Ramsay said, "have you come to yield? My dogs miss your pretty sister's screams." Now. Jon felt cold fury burn, but he kept his voice steady. "Winterfell is mine. Leave, and you may live." Ramsay laughed, echoing across the silent camp. Men chuckled. Someone spat. "Bold words from a boy who bleeds. And yet you rode alone. Honor is it, or fools hope for mercy?" Jon's eyes was steel. "I came to end this without more dead northerners." "Dead men cannot flay," Ramsay said. "I prefer living skin." He leaned forward. "I will hang you from your father's walls, piece by bloody piece." He did not see the shape behind his rearmost tents, a pale streak of motion, silent and swift. Dawn flashed once as Dayne severed the throat of the western sentry. The broken north curtain of the siege collapsed under a thundering charge of hooves. As Ramsay's words echoed, a horn blared from the east where Manderley banners rose like blue whales breaching an icy sea. A silver merman trident raised. Arrows hissed from Winterfell's walls, and Tormund's wildlings barreled from a sally port, axes high, roaring like hungry bears. Ramsay spun his horse, face slack with shock. Jon drew Longclaw. Chaos erupted. Dayne's spearhead cut through hired sellsword infantry, as if they were reeds before a scythe. Dawn glimmered, edge shimmering in every arc. Men who met its kiss fell gripping bright wounds that steamed in the cold. Panic spread faster than blood. Stories of a dead knight returned, a sword that drank the dawn. Even seasoned fighters wavered at the sight of the white blade carving through shield walls. Jon fought towards Ramsay, parrying a thrust from a Bolton captain, slashing backhand to tear through mail and flesh. Ghost lunged beside him, dragging a pikeman down, jaws closing with a crunch that silenced screams. Snow churned crimson. Ramsay wheeled his stallion, shouting orders drowned by horns and the crash of steel. Fire swept suddenly across the siege line. Pitch barrels ignited by Bran's ravens, dropping flaming brand-tipped cloths they had plucked from Winterfell's brazier pits. Ropes burned. Siege towers caught like candles. The screams of horses added to the din. Dayne reached the rear, where the Bolton kennelmaster loosed his hounds. He pivoted as the first beast lunged. Dawn slid through fur and bone. The creature crumpled mid-leap. Another hound snapped at Dayne's calf. He whirled, pommel cracking its skull. He did not slow. Behind him, his gray-clad knights shattered a company of Sellswords, leaving the survivors to winter's mercy. Jon closed the distance to Ramsay. The Bolton heir's eyes, icily blue, devoid of sanity, met his with murderous delight. "Come then, bastard," he hissed, drawing a thin, cruel blade. "Let us see whose bastardy the gods favor." They clashed amid blazing wreckage, long claws Valyrian steel ringing clear. Ramsay was quick, vicious, but Jon had trained at Castle Black, fought wildings at the wall, faced wights in the frost. He turned aside a savage thrust, but Ramsay's dagger snaked out, scoring Jon's forearm. Jon hissed, pivoted, and elbowed the man in the jaw. Ramsay staggered, spitting blood. Jon pressed, until an arrow whistled past, missing his cheek by inches. Ramsay's archers upon a low ridge were trying to pick him off. A howl split the smoke. Ghost bounded up the ridge, scattering bowmen, mauling. Jon seized the chance and lunged. Ramsay parried too late. Longclaw pierced mail beneath his arm, sliding into lungs. Ramsay's eyes bulged. He gasped, crimson froth flecking his lips. Jon jerked the sword free. Ramsay fell to his knees, still grasping his dagger, raising it weakly. Jon knocked the blade aside and cleaved again. An end swift, but not merciful. Bolton banners wavered. Their lord lay dead, their lines crumbling. On the eastern horizon, Vale lancers thundered over ridge lines, fresh pennants streaming. Late, but now unstoppable. The Bolton host broke. Many tossed arms and fled toward the King's Road. Others surrendered where they stood, falling to knees in the snow. Arthur Dayne reined his charger beside Jon, dawn dripping with frost and blood. Their eyes met. Around them, Winterfell's men cheered, a ragged roar swelling into the sky. Yet the sword in Dayne's hand hummed still. A tremor almost felt more than heard, as though it knew darker foes awaited beyond mortal armies. Dayne felt it in his bones. The others stirred far to the north, white shadows testing the edge of the world. Today's victory was but a spark in gathering night. Nonetheless, sparks can birth flame. He raised dawn high. The first rays of true morning broke through torn clouds, catching the blade, white fire burning, a beacon over Winterfell. Snowflakes melted mid-air in its brilliance. Men gaped, some whispering prayers. For an instant, the north felt the warmth of the sun, though day was barely birth. Sansa emerged through the postern. Skirts lifted free of slush, eyes wide at the sight of the field. She found Ramsay's corpse, and tears welled. Of relief, of release from horror. She looked to Arthur Dayne, then to Jon, her half-brother she had found again. "We have our home." Jon nodded, bloodied, exhausted. For now. Dayne's gaze shifted to the horizon northward, where the wall lay unseen but unforgotten. "The true war waits beyond," he whispered. Jon followed that gaze. Snowflakes fell heavier once more, spinning like pale moths above blood-soaked ground. In their swirling dance he glimpsed a silent promise of ice, of ancient kings riding dead horses, of winter's heart beating slow and cold. He shivered, not from the chill, but from the knowledge that Winterfell's walls, newly saved, might soon face an enemy that steel and stone could not easily repel. But that was tomorrow. Today, the wolf flew again above Winterfell, bold as any hero's banner, and the sword of the morning had returned with dawn, proof that death itself could falter before honor reclaimed. Inside the gates, they gathered their wounded, tended fires, and for the first time in many years, the great hall echoed with the sound of hope. Night fell upon a field of broken tents and frozen corpses. Flickering torches dotted the perimeter as scavengers searched the dead for kin. Beyond the outer trench, crude pyres blazed, stark men burning Bolton soldiers with the same prayers each foe once mocked. Words to the old gods, smoke to the new. Ghost padded among them like a silent warden, eyes reflecting the flames that devoured flayed banners. Jon sat alone beneath the heart tree in Winterfell's godswood, snow shaking from crimson leaves. Longclaw rested across his knees. He felt heavy, hollow as a sheathed sword. Victory tasted of ash. Death had taken many he had sworn to protect, again. Only when the crunch of boots disturbed the hush did he stir. Arthur Dayne approached, cloak unfurled, silver eyes gleaming in moonlight. He carried neither helm nor gloves, only dawn slung horizontal across both hands. Kneeling before the weirwood, he placed the blade upon the ground, point toward the trunk. The sword's milk-glass length seemed to glow of its own accord. "I have brought dawn home to rest," Dayne said. "This is not Starfall," Jon replied. "No." Yet dawn was forged in the days when the first men walked north of the neck. Many believe the blade remembers. In this place of old magic, I ask the old gods to judge me. Jon leaned back against the roots. "Why confess to trees?" "They listen," Dayne said simply. "And they do not lie." He touched the staining bark. "A tower of joy, your father chose honor over king. I chose loyalty over mercy. In doing so, I slayed men sworn to reach you alive. I have carried guilt each dawn." "Men are why." Jon's chest tightened. "My father rarely spoke of that day." "I know." Dayne's voice was raw. "He spared me when he might have ended my life beside my brothers. He commanded me to vanish, to keep secret the child Lyanna bore. So I fled south, then east across the narrow sea, hunted, forgotten, until word came that Stark blood had risen again, under siege, dying. Honor demanded my return." Jon gazed at the spectral blade. "You saved us." Dayne shook his head. "Only delayed the storm. The others ride. Their tide will swallow all if we do not bind together. My sword alone cannot hold back the night." He regarded Jon. "But maybe you can. I'm no king." "Kings matter less than symbols," Dayne said. "You carry the North's hope. You faced death, betrayed vows, still rose. People follow that." He gestured to Longclaw. "Valyrian steel, ancestral blades awaken against shadow. Dawn and Longclaw, Catspaw and Heartsbane. Lost swords now found. Perhaps the gods gather their champions." Jon exhaled, watching his breath ghost upward. "If I must wear that mantle, I'll need help." Dayne bowed his head. "Then you have the first of many swords." He lifted Dawn, offering its hilt. A white stone pommel shaped like a falling star. "Wield her." Jon stared. "She is not mine. Dawn belongs to no man," Dayne said. "Only to one worthy in the hour of need. Take her until the light returns." Jon hesitated, then closed fingers round the grip. Dawn felt warm, as if pulsing gently. He drew the blade. Under moonlight, the milky edge shimmered with a faint lavender iridescence. Power thrummed through his hand, like holding distilled dawnlight. "What do I do with it?" he asked softly. "Lead," Dayne replied. They sat in silence, the weirwood weeping crimson sap, the swordsman stripped of title, the bastard lifted by starlight. Above, ravens circled thrice, then fled south, their dark wings beating urgent rhythms against an indifferent sky. Far beyond Winterfell, at the wall's frigid height, horns sounded, 3 long blasts in the frozen night. but their echoes carried only into empty wastes of snow, for none alive in Castle Black remained to hear. Shadows with blue eyes walked the courtyard, ice cracking under ancient feet. Pale hands brushed weathered stone, remembering a home long lost. The gate groaned, swung outward, and the cold wind whispered of dawns to end. In the stables at first light, Arya Stark returned astride a shaggy horse, having ridden like a ghost through enemy lines with the hound at her flank. She saw the Bolton banners smoking in heaps, and shook her head with feral satisfaction. "You couldn't wait," she chided Jon, sliding lithely from the saddle. He caught her in an embrace, disbelief and joy entwined. She laughed into his shoulder. "I left you one name," she said, "and you crossed it out." Jon tousled her wind-whipped hair. He crossed himself out. The hound spat into the straw. "Bloody northern idiots. Win one scrap and think winter's over." Arya raised an eyebrow. "Sandor Clegane, meet Sir Arthur Dayne." The big man froze, one eye narrowing. "Thought you were dead." "Many did," Dayne replied, inclining his head. "I seem to have disappointed them." The hound grunted. "Long as you don't disappoint me with songs." A snort. "I leave songs to poets." Outside, bells tolled from the broken towers. Winterfell awakened fully, a lion shaking snow from its mane. New banners were stitched, sigils repainted. But north of the wall, a horn still cried unanswered, and a dance of swords older than houses waited to begin. Dayne watched Jon depart the yard, dawn across his back, Arya running to keep stride. Snow drifted like silent ash. He touched the fresh blood-red leaves pinned in his belt, a weirwood sprig gifted by Bran. The boy had woken after the battle and spoken cryptic words. "The day's sword meets the night's heart. Two lights, one flame." Dayne did not yet decipher the omen, but he felt its weight in the marrow of his bones. He swung into his saddle. There was work to do. Alliances to forge, steel to gather, truths to face. The North's victory here would echo across the Seven Kingdoms, stirring old loyalties, rousing the Vale and Riverlands, perhaps even prying Tyrell spears from their southern roses. And beyond the narrow sea, dragons wheeled in foreign skies, answering ancient blood's call. He glanced at the battlements where Sansa watched, cloak whipping in the wind, eyes afire with new purpose. The Wolf Princess, reborn. Beside her stood Davos and Tormund, both talking fast, mapping out supply routes, speaking of how many men could ride by fortnight's end. Every face seemed lit, from within, by hope, by fear, by determination. War had come home at last, but so had courage. Dayne guided his horse toward the open gate. The courtyard rang with the hammering of smiths, reforging broken weapons. Sparks flew high, bright as stars. One by one they dimmed, falling to die upon the packed snow. But the forge roared on, and steel shone molten, ready to be beaten into shapes the world had not seen for an age. The sword of the morning rode out, pale blade like dawnstone across his saddle. Behind him, Winterfell breathed, bloodied yet unbowed. Heartwood kindling a flame that would burn all the brighter against the gathering dark. And somewhere in that unseen dark, cold eyes opened. "And K." The forge fires roared all night, and by the hour before dawn every anvil in Winterfell rang beneath a smith's hammer. Sparks danced like fireflies, drifting up the vaulted chimneys to mingle with the falling snow. Jon Snow stood among the clangor, jaw tight, as Gendry Baratheon hefted a half-finished spearhead, the color of obsidian shot through with silver veins. The bastard of King Robert wiped soot from his brow, squinting at the strange metal's shimmer. "It's castle-forged steel folded with dragon glass, like Samwell said," Gendry muttered. "But the glass melts quick. Takes a sure hand to keep the edge." Jon ran a thumb along the cool, unfinished ridge. "The edge must hold." "It will, if the glass don't shatter," the smith replied. "Bring me more. Enough to arm every man who'll ride north. We have only what Stannis left at Castle Black, and what Sam found at Dragonstone," Jon said. "Less than a wagon load. Then we'll make each piece count." Gendry plunged the spearhead back into the coals. The ember light cast flickering shadows across his broad shoulders. But I'll need better bellows than these stunted northerners use. A hotter flame. Arthur Dayne emerged from the dim aisle between anvils, snow melting on his hair. Dawn was tempered in the heart of a fallen star, he said, voice calm amid the din. Forge your dragonglass in dragonfire, and the edge will sing. Gendry grunted, more respectful than doubtful. You have a dragon handy, sir. Not yet, Dayne answered. But perhaps soon. He turned to Jon. Send ravens to Dragonstone. Entreat the queen across the sea. If legend holds, her dragons will not ignore the Song of Dawn. Jon hesitated. Daenerys Targaryen crosses the narrow sea in fire and blood. So the stories say. The North mistrusts her line. Arthur's violet gaze was steady. Trust is a luxury. Steel and flame are needs. If we stand alone when the dead come, we fall. Before Jon could reply, a horn's low mournful note shuddered across the yard. The noise silenced hammers. Every smith froze. The watch on the battlements blew again. 2 long calls, summoning commander and council. Jon, Dayne, and Gendry hurried from the forge, boots crunching frost. Upon the gatehouse parapet, Davos Seaworth pointed eastward. In the gray half-light, a rider approached, banner streaming, white falcon on sky-blue field, wings spread wide. Vale knights followed close behind, a wedge of lances glinting. Sansa appeared beside Davos, gloved fingers gripping the parapet. Lord Royce, she breathed. They made it. Jon exhaled relief as the gates creaked open. Bronze Jon Royce rode in, burnished armor matching his stern demeanor. Behind him poured 300 Vale cavalry, eyes sharp, horses snorting clouds. Royce dismounted, bowing to Sansa. My lady. The Eyrie stands with House Stark, as Lord Nestor commands in the boy lord's stead. Jon clasped the elder knight's forearm. You honor us. Royce's gaze swept lingering across Arthur Dayne, who descended the stair with the stride of a shadow come alive. Some say a ghost wields that pale blade, yet I see flesh. Dayne inclined his head. I bleed like any man, sir. May we share blood in common cause rather than in feud. Royce studied him, then nodded. I fought under Hoster Tully at the Bells. I've seen heroes return when the realm needed them. Perhaps we need heroes now. They convened in the great hall. Fires blazing beneath banners, newly rehung. Manderly lords in rich blue velvets, Hornwoods and Serwins in wool, dyed wolf gray, wildling chiefs in furs still spattered from yesterday's battle. The long tables teemed with leaders once scattered by fear. At the head, Bran Stark sat in a carved weirwood chair, pale and quiet, eyes seeing more than stone walls. Jon outlined the task ahead. March north. Reinforce the Night's Watch, bar the gates at Last Hearth and the castles along the wall. Jon Royce listened, then rose, voice echoing. My knights ride with you, Lord Snow. But steel and courage alone will not stop a winter of the dead. Court the dragons, if dragons there be. Men now. Whispers fluttered, like harrowed birds. Manderly stroked his beard thoughtfully. If ships cross now, the sea lanes may soon freeze. We could send our fastest cog to White Harbor, bearing letters for Dragonstone. Sansa looked to Jon and Arthur. Write to Tyrion Lannister as well, he counseled her by rumor. If he vouches for us, the queen may listen. Davos offered parchment, quill, and ink, and there in the torchlit hall, Jon penned a plea to a woman he had never met. Your Grace, winter has come. The dead march. The North stands, but cannot stand alone. We have dragonglass to mine and ancient knowledge to share. Bring your fire to the wall, and we shall join our ice to it. Together, we may yet see dawn. Then I'll win. He sealed the letter with half-melted yellow wax, imprinting it with the Stark direwolf. He passed it to a young maester's aide, who hurried away to the rookery. Arthur Dayne watched the seal cool. You place much upon a single raven's wings. Jon met his gaze. Hope weighs little, sir. Men carry heavier burdens to war. Bendo. Bendow. 2 days later, scouts reported a column of riders cresting the King's Road from the south. No Bolton remnant, but Northmen racing under the black stag banner quartered with a burning heart. Jon, armored in black scale, rode out with Dayne, Tormund, and a knot of Vale Lancers. Snowflakes drifted, thick as down, veiling the world in white. Atop a rise, they found the newcomers encamped in a shallow dell, standards flapping, Stannis Baratheon, son and heart, aside the crowned stag. But the men who bore them looked ragged and thin, led by a tall, hard-eyed woman with cropped auburn hair and a sword strapped across her cloak of grey wool. She spied Jon first and rode to meet him. "I am Lady Barbary Dustin," she called, voice flinty. "I bring what remains of Stannis' host, those who would not follow the Leech King into the woods. We heard Winterfell stands free and seek rightful banners." Tormund spat in the snow. Southron's sword smell of old smoke. Dayne's smile was thin. "Better old smoke than fresh corpses." Barbary gestured behind her to a short, broad man seated on a horse draped in black wool. "Sir Godry the Giant Slayer leads the men-at-arms. We number 400 foot, 100 horse. We would pledge to Stark, if your wolves do not bite." Jon nodded. "Any sword raised against the dead is welcome. But first you must swear to fight for the living." Godry thundered a laugh, breath fogging. "I slew a giant once. I'd like to kill an ice white before I'm worm food." They clasped arms. Beneath that storm-shrouded sky, enemies became allies, bound by the coming night. And now winter deepened. Snow buried the fields beyond Winterfell's walls, rising thigh-high in drifts. Yet the castle bustled. Smiths churned arrowheads tipped with dragonglass shards, Fletchers feathered spears, seamstresses patched gambesons and quilted cloaks. Bran's ravens circled daily, cawing strange messages only he understood, while the boy himself grew quieter, communing long hours with the heart tree. One crisp morning, Arya sparred in the yard with a slim sword of dark metal. Needle returned to her hand after years apart. She danced around Podrick Payne, who wielded a stout practice blade clumsily. Each time he lunged, Arya slid inside his guard, tapping his vambrace or chest with Needle's blunted tip. Men laughed. Podrick reddened. Arthur Dayne leaned on a post nearby, dawn sheathed across his back. When Arya paused to wipe sweat, he approached. "Your stance favors speed, but steel alone cannot cut wind. Show me your strike." Arya's brows lifted. "You're the sword of the morning. You could split me like firewood." "Ah." Dayne unsheathed Dawn an inch. The milky edge glimmered. He slid it back. "A sword teaches. I will not harm you." They faced off. Podrick stepped aside gratefully. The yard hushed. Arya inhaled and dashed forward, springing with a thrust aimed at Dayne's hip. He pivoted, deflecting with 2 fingers on her blade's flat, guiding the thrust harmlessly past. She spun, slashing at his shoulders. He ducked, footwork light as snowflakes. Their dance quickened, Arya feinting high, stabbing low, Dayne countering with minimal movement, redirecting each attack until she overreached and stumbled. In that heartbeat he tapped Needle's tip with his palm and sent it flying skyward. It arced, glittering. He caught it by the hilt and offered it back, bowing. Arya's eyes blazed. "Teach me." "Gladly, but remember, speed of hand serves the mind's stillness. Still waters cut deepest." She pondered that riddle, then grinned wolfishly. Watching from the covered walk, Sansa exhaled. She turned to Jon. "She's found a teacher to replace Syrio. If she lives, it will be thanks to him." "Done." Jon's answer was brittle. "If any of us live." Sansa laid a hand on his arm. "We must act as though we will, else despair consumes us before the dead ever arrive." Bran gathered the council in the solar 3 nights after the new moon. Fire crackled, casting dancing shadows across maps weighted with daggers. Ghost dozed at Jon's feet, tail twitching. Bran's voice came soft, but the hush that fell around him made it thunder. I dreamed beneath the heart tree, he began, eyes distant, pupils revolving like slow stars. The ravens showed me Eastwatch by the sea, the castle's gate hurled open, and the ocean frozen 10 leagues out. I saw figures walking across the ice, armored in rime, blue eyes burning. The Night King rides west. A chill swept the room deeper than the wind outside. Tormund cursed low. Davos breathed a prayer. How long? Jon asked. Days, not moons, Bran said. He moved swift as thought. Arthur Dayne drew dawn, tip resting on the plank floor. Then, we ride tomorrow. Manderley cleared his throat. Many horses cannot march through drifts so deep. We can send the Vale cavalry, the wildlings on furs, but the foot must follow by caribou sleds or snowshoes. That will slow us. Bender Hawaii. Sansa bit her lip. If the wall is falling, no footman will matter. We send our fastest to harass his flanks, delay his van, then hold Moat Cailin until the rest catch up. Royce traced the map. Dotto. My falcons and Dayne's riders can reach the gift lands in 6 days, if weather spares us. Jon looked to Bran. Will it spare us? Bran's gaze clouded. The storm rides with him. Silence. Then Gendry slammed a mailed fist to the table. Storm or no, the dead don't forge spears. Let me finish these weapons. Give me 4 more days. We may have only 4, Davos replied. And what then? Arthur lifted Dawn, pale blade reflecting firelight. Then we test legend against nightmare. The first letter raven returned at dusk the next day. Snow caked on its wings. The maester unrolled the scrap, hands trembling. Jon read the cramped Valyrian glyphs translated beneath. Queen Daenerys Targaryen sails for White Harbor with dragons at dawn. Bend the knee and the realm shall see a new spring. Davos rubbed his temples. A polite demand. Sansa's lips pressed into a thin line. She will expect Jon to kneel. Arya snorted. Let her. She'll kneel once Jon saves her life from the dead. Bran spoke without heat. Kneel or not, the dragon's fire is needed. Pride wins no battles against whites. Jon folded the letter. The choice matters less than our survival. But I will not ask Northmen to fight for a queen they do not know, before they know what fight faces us all. Arthur placed a steady hand on Jon's shoulder. When dragons arrive, show her the forge, the spears tipped with her island's glass, the smiths whose hands bleed for the living. She may come as conqueror. Let her leave as ally? Jon nodded slowly. And if she refuses? Dayne's gaze drifted to Dawn. Steel will answer. And they rode from Winterfell before the sun's rim crowned the sky. Banners snapping, hoofbeats drumming, snow plumes billowing like smoke. Jon led 200 Vale lancers, 100 of Stannis veterans, and Tormund with 1,000 wildling spears on shaggy garrons. Arthur Dayne rode just behind the vanguard, dawn bright against the gloom. Sansa remained to marshal the foot, to gather provisions, to dispatch ravens to White Harbor guiding the Targaryen fleet. Arya rode with Jon Need. Lee at her hip, eyes bright as ice chips, undead list in her heart. Bran watched from the battlement until the last rider vanished into white mist, then retreated to his weirwood throne, ravens gathering like whispers on the branches. The column moved north through knee-deep powder. Winds moaning died dull. They skirted the King's Road where drifts buried wagons to their axles. At dusk, they camped in a copse of bare willows. Vale squires dug trenches for fires. Wildlings erected hide tents stained with old blood. Jon walked the perimeter, Longclaw's pommel buckled under his cloak. Each breath hung in the air like a ghost refusing to depart. Arthur joined him near the edge, where the land dipped into a frozen, streamed. The men fear the dark, he said. They have cause. So do I. But fear-tempered can serve. He angled his chin to the sky where dim lights rippled, pale curtains of green across the stars. The aurora dances brighter each night. Old tales say it is dawn's promise in winter's heart. Men? Jon smiled without mirth. Old tales seldom mention the cost. Dayne's eyes glinted. Nor the choice. He drew Dawn an inch. I heard you met your choice once, dagger in the heart, dragon's fire, a red priestess's prayer. Jon stiffened. I remember the cold. I remember nothing else. Cold is what we ride to meet, Dayne said. Remember the warmth that brought you back. Remember why. Ben? Jon's gaze settled on the camp beyond, where Tormund laughed with giant's kin, where Gendry hammered a pot lid into a crude breastplate, where Arya polished needle beside a fire. I remember. Night settled heavy, but no attack came. The dead were yet leagues distant. At false dawn the horn sounded twice, scouts returning fast. Muddy-faced men slid from horses, eyes wide. The Umber stronghold burns, one gasp. Last hearth is but embers, no living souls. Jon's stomach clenched. Shaggy Dog once roamed Umber halls. Rickon Stark lay buried beneath its oaken floors. Now nothing remained but ash. How far? He asked. 2 days' march for us, the scout said. But the tracks we saw, thousands of feet, shape of no living thing. They move quicker than men, even in snow. Arthur Dayne swung into saddle. Ride. Dayne. They reached the charred ruins of Last Hearth at dusk on the second day. Smoke still drifted from blackened stones. The wooden palisade lay shattered, the great oak gates flung wide. Piles of bodies ringed the courtyard, frost-stiff in contorted heaps. Jon dismounted, stomach knotted. Wildlings muttered prayers to nameless spirits of earth and sky. Vale knights crossed themselves beneath cloaks. Arthur knelt beside a corpse, eyes frozen vivid blue, mouth agape in silent snarl. He touched the throat, then peeled back chain mail. The skin beneath bore no blood. The veins were dark, congealed. Dawn's pale glow dimmed as if the blade recoiled from the chill. They left none re-rising, Dayne murmured. Mercy or mockery? Arya stepped between bodies, lips pressed thin, face pale. They arranged them in circles. She said, pointing to the patterned ring of corpses forming a spiral toward the keep's heart. The Night King leaves messages. Tormund spat. Dead men can keep their bloody art. They searched the ruin, found no living soul. Jon lit the pyres himself, dragging bodies into the spiral's center, stacking wood. Flames roared, consuming flesh and fabric. The smell of burning hair and frozen rot filled the night. When only embers glowed, Bran's ravens arrived, cawing, settling on charred beams. Jon raised his lantern. What news? He whispered, absurd question to blackbirds. One raven cocked its head, then spoke in Bran's voice, raspy, distorted. Dawn rides with you. Night rides faster. Eastwatch falls in 3 nights. Now. Wildlings stumbled back, muttering curses. Jon's blood chilled. Bran's warg speak had startled even the hardiest warrior. Arthur recovered first. 3 nights, he repeated. Then the sea gate opens to the dead. Jon's jaw tightened. We cannot reach Eastwatch in 3 nights. No, Dayne agreed. But we can reach the Gift's Edge by 2, meet them halfway. Harass, delay, draw them into terrain of our choosing. Royce joined them, gaze grim. We should fall back to the Queen's Crown ruins. Narrow passes, stone towers. Archers above, pikes below. Shao. Tormund shook his head. Too cramped. Whites swarm like rats in tunnels. Better the boulder fields beneath the fledging cliffs. Room for horses, flanks to hammer. Jon turned to Dayne. Your call. Dayne viewed the burning swirl, a sign of death's artistry. The Night King speaks in circles, he said slowly. Break the circle. Draw him out. Boulder fields grant movement. The cliffs deny encirclement on 2 sides. There we stand. He looked north. Ride through moonrise, rest at dawn. Dig trenches by midday. Leave nothing to chance. They rode. Across starlit snowfields the column pushed. Hooves muffled, breath steaming. Hearts pounding. Dawn's pale blade guided at the fore. Shimmering like the faint promise of sunrise. And now, the boulder field sprawled beneath escarpments of dark shale, a frozen labyrinth. Ancient glaciers had spilled their guts here, littering the plain with stones the size of cottages. Snow draped them like shrouds, but narrow lanes remained, ideal for cavalry charges or sudden retreats. Gendry and Godry's men felled pines on the escarpment edge, rolling trunks down to create barricades. Wildlings dug trenches and set rows of sharpened stakes. Vale archers scaled the larger boulders, hammering iron pitons for perches. Jon climbed the highest rock, wind tearing his cloak. From this vantage every lane and cul-de-sac appeared part of a vast stone web. He could almost imagine the Night King's army flowing through it, endless blue-eyed waves crashing against jagged shore. Arthur Dayne joined him, silent. Together they listened to the winter. No birds, no running water, only the sigh of distant wind. "When dawn breaks," Jon said, "we must still be here." Dayne's gaze traced the horizon. "Dawn may not break." Jon met his eyes. "Then, we carry it." The sword of the morning inclined his head, unsheathing dawn and planting it point first into the stone. It slid in with preternatural ease, as though sinking into snow. A faint thrum vibrated through the rock. "Let them come," he said. Now. They came at sundown on the second day, a low growl of ice cracking beneath myriad feet, a creeping mist that swallowed the far edge of the field. Shapes emerged, first a scattering of pale wolves with rime-frosted fur, then a line of hollow-cheeked giants, tusks rimed with frost, each bearing tree-trunk clubs. Behind them marched thousands of wights. Men, women, children, wildlings, and free-folk, Night's Watch brothers in ragged black, all bound by the Night King's will. Their eyes burned cerulean, empty of pity. And at the center, riding a dead stallion with hooves of crystal, the Night King himself, armor of dark ice carved in jagged ridges. A single spear of frozen glass rested in his hand, so clear it was nearly invisible. When he raised it, the white ranks halted. Silence gripped the field. Jon drew Longclaw. Its rippled steel seemed dull beside dawn's glow. Arthur Dayne descended from the boulder, blade in both hands, moonlight kissing the pale metal. The Night King's gaze fixed on him, cold fire sparking in bottomless eyes. Without word or warning, the undead surged. Giants thundered down the lanes, hurling clubs. White wolves darted ahead like shadows in moonlit water. The ground shook. Jon gave the signal. Horns blared. From the barricades, barrels of pitch were toppled, torches hurled. Lines of fire snaked through trenches, igniting a barrier that forced the dead to funnel into narrow stone corridors. Vale archers loosed black-fletched arrows tipped with dragon glass. Shafts hissed, striking wolves that burst in crystal shards, giants that shrieked as glass bit bone. Tormund led wildlings in a wedge charge down the central lane, axes dripping black fire oil. They clove into the first wave, hacking limbs that crawled on without torsos. Jon thundered along the flank with Royce's heavy cavalry, lances lowered, skewering clusters of wights, trampling the fallen. Each burst of bones sent snow pluming. Yet for every corpse shattered, two more stepped over it. The Night King advanced slowly, spear lowered, eyes never leaving dawn. Wind swirled, carrying ice shards sharp as razors. Arthur Dayne moved through chaos like living starlight, dawn carving arcs of milky flame. Each stroke severed two wights, the blade humming. Giants fell at his feet, wolves dissolved in sparking snow. Men shouted his name until their throats cracked. Yet still, the dead pressed, heedless. Royce was pulled from the saddle by three wights. Jon spurred to reach him, cleaving one apart, another, dragging the knight free. Godry, the giant slayer, crushed skulls with his flanged mace, laughing until an undead bear tackled him, jaws closing on steel. He roared, wrestled free, but the bear tore a chunk of flesh before Jon's spear finished it. Godry bled crimson on white snow, yet fought on, mace dripping. Far above, ravens spiraled. Among them, Bran's eyes watched, feeling every death, tasting cold in every breath. He sent one bird south, shrieking over forests toward Winterfell. Now, at Winterfell's forge, Gendry heard the raven cry as it landed upon his anvil, cawing. He lifted the spear of dragonglass he had finished only hours before. Sansa, standing with the foothost, read Bran's desperate note. Fly the dragon's path to the field of boulders. The night is here. She swallowed fear. March, she commanded. Foot soldiers surged for the northern gate, banners whipping, torches flaring. But north of the boulder field, icy wind howled louder. The Night King lifted his spear of crystal and hurled it. It cut the air soundlessly, straight toward Arthur Dayne. Dawn flicked up, meeting the spear mid-flight. Metal kissed crystal. The spear exploded in a shower of shards that melted before they touched the ground. For an instant everything froze. The Night King's hand hung empty. Dayne knelt, one knee in snow. Dawn's edge nicked, thin frost crackling along the blade. He rose, and the frost flaked away in shining motes. The Night King drew a second spear, from nothing, conjured like breath on glass, and advanced. Jon saw the giant menace, the tide. "Form on me," he bellowed. Cavalry wheeled, forming a ring around Dayne. Tormund's wildlings retreated to join, forging a rough circle beneath the cliffs. Whites crashed against their shields in waves. Arrows gone, pikes shattered, they fought with torch and axe and hatred. The Night King stalked ever closer through his thralls. Snow eddied around him, twisting into barbed spirals. Giants battered barricades, boulders cracked under brute strength. Line by line, living warriors fell. Jon cut down a shrieking wight in watch-blacks. He recognized the face, a brother who had laughed with him at Eastwatch. Despair spiked through his heart. Then a scream rent the clouds. Not human, vast, thunderous. Flame bloomed above the cliffs. A great shadow swept overhead, wings blocking the stars, followed by another and another. Dragonfire cascaded, a river of molten gold, pouring among the dead. Snow flashed to steam, whites turned to ash. The charge of undead faltered. Jon's head snapped up. 3 dragons wheeled, black Drogon, green Rhaegal, gold cream Viserion. Though Viserion's scales now bore frost scars from the long flight. Upon Drogon's neck perched a woman in dark leather, silver hair streaming. Daenerys Targaryen. Close behind on Rhaegal clung Tyrion Lannister, pale but resolute. On Viserion rode Missandei, jaw firm taut. Dragonfire washed over the horde in roaring tides. Giants toppled, whites incinerated. The Night King raised one hand, frost shield forming, flame parting around him. With the other, he hurled his second spear, not at Dayne, but at Rhaegal. The crystal spear struck scales, shattering, yet shards embedded, bleeding smoke. Rhaegal shrieked, banking hard, nearly unseating Tyrion. Drogon roared, plunging to shield his brother. Daenerys leaned forward, eyes blazing. Dracarys. Drogon spewed a torrent of burning fury at the Night King. Dayne leaped aside as flame blanketed the field. Snow melted, rock cracked. When the firestorm passed, the Night King stood still. Armor glowing faint blue, frost swirling anew. Unharmed. Jon's heart sank. But dawn gleamed brighter, as though feeding on the fire's residue. Dayne advanced, blade raised. "With me," he called. Jon, Arya, Tormund, Godry, and 30 others formed a wedge. Together they charged through steam toward the Night King. White surged to intercept, but dragonfire carved tunnels in their ranks. Dawn's song rose, a keening like wind through silver reeds. It cleaved the first barrel white in 2. Light flaring, blue flames snuffed. Arya ducked beneath a white's axe, needle darting to pierce its skull. Tormund's axe split rib cages, tossing limbs. Jon's long claw shattered skeletons. Closer they came, 10 yards, 5 tore. The Night King loosed a breath that glittered. Frost shot out, crystallizing the ground, slowing their legs. Dayne sprang, blade flashing. Frost thickened on his greaves, but he swung, yawning arc Godai. Dawn met the Night King's armored forearm. Sparks of starlight erupted. Armor cracked, a thin fissure. The Night King's hand closed on Arthur's throat. Ice spider-webbed across Dayne's gorget. Jon lunged with Longclaw, but the Night King twisted, Jon's thrust glancing off slick ice. Arya leapt, left hand empty. Right aimed at the creature's blind spot, but he wheeled, backhanding her with inhuman force. She flew, landing in drifted snow, breath gone. Dayne's vision tunneled. Blue eyes engulfed his. The Night King lifted him, intending to snap spine. Arthur's right hand still clutched Dawn. With his last strength he drove the blade tip between frosted plates, into the Night King's chest. For one heartbeat nothing happened. Then Dawn pulsed, white radiance blazing. A ringing like a bell echoed. Frost shattered from Dayne's armor. The Night King's grip loosened. Darkness crackled inside the fissure. Jon saw the blue flame in those ancient eyes flicker. He raised Longclaw two-handed and struck where Dawn had opened a wound. Valyrian steel met star-forged blade, clamped metal grinding, driving deeper together. A shriek pierced the world. So shrill dragons faltered mid-air, men clutched ears. The Night King's body fissured in 1,000 cracks of black ice. Blue fire poured from him like shattered glass. He exploded in silent light. Shockwave rippled, hurling whites backward, collapsing them in ragged heaps. Giants froze, then crumbled to shards. Wolves keeled over, motionless. For a breath, the night glowed with scattered embers of cold lightning, then snuffed. Silence fell. Arthur Dayne collapsed to one knee. Jon caught him, dawn slipping from fingers to clatter on stone. Still blazing faint, the frozen ranks of undead lay inert, lifeless corpses once more. Tormund staggered, eyes wide. Is it done? Smoke drifted where the Night King had stood. Nothing but shards of dark ice melting into water. High above, dragons circled, uncertain. Daenerys guided Drogon lower, eyes scanning. Jon waved an arm. She landed. Snow gusts, billowing. He met her gaze. The Night King is no more. Daenerys slid from Drogon, boots crunching. You killed him. Woo, Jon said. He turned to Arthur, still kneeling, breath ragged. Dayne looked up, a faint smile softening his hard features. 'Twas dawn that broke night, he whispered. Jon clasped his forearm. And the man who bore it. Daenerys stepped forward, light of campfires reflecting in violet eyes. Then let this be the first dawn of a new alliance. She extended a gauntleted hand. Jon hesitated only a moment before grasping it. Ice and fire, joined in frost-blue twilight. Around them, men began to cry out in disbelief, in relief, in grief for the fallen. Dragons roared triumph into the sky. Arya rose unsteady, snow dusting her hair, eyes shining. Gendry tore helmet free, cheering Detot. Godry sank to knees, mace raised to heavens. Vale Knights pounded shields. Wildlings howled wolf songs. Yet Bran's raven watched from a stone shelf, head tilted. Through its beak came a hollow voice. The Night King falls, shadows linger. Beware the heart of winter. No one heard but the vacant sky. And oh, they burned the bodies beneath moonlit cliffs. Flames towered, reflected in frozen waterfalls. Snowflakes melted in updrafts, turning to steam that drifted heavenward like departing souls. Jon stood near the pyres, ash coating his cheeks. Arthur Dayne approached, dawn resting across both palms. He offered the blade's hilt. I am no longer worthy to bear her, he murmured. A new sword of the morning rises when dawn is born anew. Jon shook his head. You still breathe, and we still need you. Dayne's shoulders relaxed. Then dawn remains in my hand, until I can pass her with honor to a Dayne yet unborn. Jon smiled. Faint. I would not deprive history of that tale. Daenerys joined them, cloak swirling. Tyrion trudged beside, bandage on brow. She gazed at the dwindling fires. One enemy beaten. Yet Cersei Lannister still sits the Iron Throne, and spring will not return while war rages south. Jon answered softly. Then we ride south, but not as conquerors. We ride as the living who face death together." Dayne glanced toward Arya, who stood alone, watching flames with haunted eyes. "And some scars may never mend," he said. "Scars remind us we survived," Daenerys replied. "Survival grants the chance to heal." Snow began to fall anew, gentle, unhurried, as though the sky sighed after a long-held breath. The three of them, bastard wolf, Targaryen queen, sword of starlight, stood side by side, warmed by fire and united by loss. Atop the highest boulder Bran's raven flapped wings, then took flight southward, toward Winterfell, where Sansa marshaled a host, where Gendry forged hope, where children of the north dreamed of summer they had never seen. In the raven's wake, the curtain of night parted eastward. Pale light spilled across horizon's edge, not full dawn, but its promise. The field of boulders glimmered in that light, stones shining like tiny moons upon the snow. Some men knelt, praying. Others simply stared, hollow with wonder. Jon closed his eyes and felt warmth where there had been none for so long. He thought of Ned, of Robb, of gentle Rickon, of somehow seeing their ghosts smile. He opened his eyes to the living beside him and the path yet before them. "We march for peace," he said. Dayne lifted Dawn, the blade catching nascent dawn glow, reflecting it bright across the fires. "And carry light into any shadow that remains." Birdsong trilled, a single lark brave enough to break winter silence. Men turned, surprised, as though they had forgotten such music existed. Daenerys smiled at the simple sound. Dragons rumbled overhead, wings stirring snow that glinted like scattered diamonds. Somewhere far below the wall, buried deep beneath endless ice, something ancient stirred at the Night King's fall. Old magic unbound, neither dead nor living. But for this hour, the North breathed, and the dawn that Arthur Dayne bore in his hand blazed hope bright enough to blind despair. And so the long night broke, not in legendary prophecy alone, but in the deeds of blade and blood, of dragon fire and wolf courage, of a knight returned from death to repay a debt, and a bastard king who learned that to bend the knee and to stand tall can be one and the same when it is done for a realm that must endure. The fires burned down to glowing coals, and the living at last laid down arms to rest, the taste of ashes and hope mingling on their tongues, while dawn's first true rays crept above the horizon, touching Arthur Dayne's sword and turning its pale edge to living fire. Snowmelt dripped in silver threads from the overhang of the boulder field, pattering softly against the charred mail that lay half buried beneath new-fallen powder. Dawn's first true light had crested the eastern ridge, chasing the long night from the sky. Now a pearlescent wash of pink and gold edged every frozen stone, as though the gods had run a delicate brush across the battlefield, to remind the living that color still existed in the world. Campfires sputtered low, their wood exhausted. What flames remained licked the air in weary sighs, more ember than blaze. Yet men lingered beside them, reluctant to move, lest the fragile peace shatter like brittle ice and the dead rise again. Jon Snow woke in the gray between dreams and daylight. He lay wrapped in a bearskin beside a dwindling coal pit, body aching from 100 small cuts, bruises tightening across ribs and thigh like iron bands. Ghost slumbered at his back, the great direwolf's warmth a steady weight against the chill that seeped into everything. For a moment, Jon resisted rising, letting the hush seep into his bones, listening to the breath of the world without war drums or the distant rattle of bones on ice. There was only wind, the crack of thawing branches, and the faint murmur of voices. He opened his eyes. Beyond the low embankment where he had collapsed, the makeshift encampment stirred. Knights of the Vale moved in disciplined silence, folding tents, brushing frost from barding, tightening girths. Wildlings cursed amiably at stiff leather straps and stubborn cooking pots. Former men-at-arms of Stannis Baratheon clanged poleaxes against shields, knocking slush from rusted edges. Daenerys dragons roosted further south, silhouettes against the warming sky, Drogon resting atop a massive shelf of stone with wings half unfurled. Regal curled around the trunk of a stripped pine to lick frost from his wounded flank, and Viserion perched watchful near the smoldering pits, tail flicking irritably at ravens that ventured too close. Even injured, the beasts emanated power. The smell of sulphurous breath and hot ash hung around them like invisible banners. Jon rolled stiffly to his knees, roused Ghost with a soft word, and strode downhill toward the command fire, where Davos Seaworth stood ankle-deep in snow, stirring a clay pot that steamed fragrant with onion and venison. A ragged half-cloak of green and brown hung from the Onion Knight's shoulders, its salt and lime sigil scorched at the hem. Davos offered a tired but genuine smile. "Morning, my lord," or whatever passes for it these days. He extended a wooden ladle. "Broth is thin, but it'll warm your innards." Jon sipped and nearly sighed. The liquid was barely thicker than water, yet carried a ghost of marrow and spice that quickened sluggish veins. He wiped his mouth and glanced north where last night's pyres had guttered out. Only pillars of blackened timbers remained, surrounded by dark patches in the snow. Crows already circled, though fewer than expected, perhaps wary of the dragons. "How many can still march by midday?" he asked. Davos pinched a fingertip of salt from a pouch and sprinkled it into the pot. "3/4 of the North's strength stand, give or take. The Vale is better, lost fewer than 50, mostly archers. Tormund's ranks thinned more." He lowered his voice. "The wildlings burned their dead separate. They still distrust southern fires." "They fought as hard as any," Jon said. Harder, some." Davos tasted the broth, grimaced, added another pinch. "Your sister sent word before dawn." The foot-host left Winterfell the moment Bran's raven arrived. "They'll strike the King's Road south of Queen's Crown by nightfall. 10,000, maybe more." Relief mingled with worry. 10,000 walking in winter would be hard-pressed to bring provisions. And the North's larder was already a frayed purse. "We need clear roads," Jon muttered. "Snow's lighter here but deep in the gift. If drifts close the passes, they'll starve before they reach us." Davos nodded toward the dragons. "Perhaps our new friends can clear a path. One sweep of fire, and ice becomes water." Jon doubted it would be that simple, yet the thought flickered hope. He handed back the cup. "Where's the Queen?" "Speaking with Lord Royce and Sir Arthur." Davos' lips twitched. "A council of flint and flame, you might say." Jon left Ghost to gnaw a bone and trudged through mingled slush and ash. The council had gathered atop the same flat slab where Bran's raven had perched the night before. Daenerys stood tall. Silver hair braided back. A mail shirt of darkened steel and leather cinched at the waist, cloak of black and crimson clasped by a trio of tiny dragon heads. Tyrion Lannister hovered at her left elbow, wrapped in a fur-lined mantle borrowed from a Vale Knight. He looked half a head shorter beside the Queen, and twice as wary. Opposite them stood Jon Royce in burnished bronze plates, axe hooked through his belt, and Tormund Giantsbane with frost in his red beard, leaning on a two-handed axe. Between the two factions was Arthur Dayne. The sword of the morning no longer bled. A white linen wrap encircled his throat where the Night King's fingers had bruised deep purple rings. Dawn rested upright before him, its blade casting a sheen that outshone sunrise. Arthur's eyes flicked to Jon as he ascended. Daenerys followed the motion and offered a curt nod. "We discussed direction," she said by way of greeting. Royce snorted. "We discussed strategy, Your Grace. Direction is a cartographer's concern." Tormund huffed. Words. Tell me who we bash first." Daenerys ignored the undercurrent of irritation. "I've agreed that we cannot linger here. Rhaegal's wound needs salve, and our supply of cured meat dwindles." Her gaze roved the encampment. "The living must consolidate around Winterfell until we're ready to march south together." Royce crossed thick arms. "My lordlings will want assurance that the dragons will not scorch our granaries on a whim." Tyrion smiled thinly. "Dragons seldom do anything on a whim. Except perhaps eat goats." "They can eat Bolton's goats." Tormund smirked, then caught himself. Bolton's no longer existed. He scratched his beard and spit into the snow. "Plenty of South men will take their place." Jon raised a palm. "We'll set outriders to clear the King's Road. When Sansa's host reaches us, we march to Winterfell together. From there we sail Daenerys' fleet to White Harbor, or the Bight, resupply, and decide the southern campaign." Tyrion spread gloved hands. "A sea crossing in winter is perilous. But the alternative is a fortnight of frozen marches through snowbound vales." "We've braved worse," Royce retorted. "A voyage invites storms and ironborn raiders." Daenerys turned to Jon. "I have 1,000 unsullied aboard my ships and more at Dragonstone waiting. The Dothraki cross with them. The Iron Fleet you fear is broken. Euron Greyjoy's longships serve me now, captained by his niece and nephew." A shadow passed across her face. Memory of Pike's betrayal, perhaps, but she pressed on. "Once my men land at White Harbor, Winterfell becomes the anvil. My dragons the hammer. King's Landing will bend." Jon exhaled, gauging the tension. "Stannis burned the Northern King banners and earned only ashes. We cannot repeat that. We need the River Lords, the Vale, the Reach, maybe Dorne. And we need a Stark at Winterfell to keep Northern hearts steady." "You propose delaying until every lord wants their piece of the lioness," Tyrion said. "No," Jon replied. "Only until they see we stand united against her. Fear breeds treachery. Hope breeds loyalty." Arthur Dayne rested his hands atop Dawn's pommel. "Then we ride to Winterfell with all haste, hold council, mend Rhaegal, feed the host. After, the Dragon Queen may fly with a token guard to parley with Storm's End. Lord Gendry's blood might sway the Stormlanders." Gendry approached just then, carrying a bundle of spearheads. His eyes widened when he heard Lord. "I'm no lord." Tyrion's brow arched. "Baratheon bastard you remain, but Stannis named you his heir before he burned." He nodded at the queen. "Cersei's usurper claim rests on lineage. So does ours." "Ben?" Gendry shifted uncomfortably, then set the spears at Arthur's feet. Dragonglass thirsty for white bone. He wiped his sweaty brow, though morning was frigid. "You speak of grand thrones while my forge cooling. Mind you reserve enough charcoal or all this steel stays blunt." Tormund threw back his head in a hearty laugh, clapping Gendry's shoulder. "Spoken like a true king of hammers." Royce quirked a grudging smile. "Hammer or crown, we all bend knee to cold if we dawdle." His gaze sought Jon's. "Your call." Jon felt the mantle settle heavy on his shoulders. He breathed deep. "Break camp in 1 hour. Dragons will overfly the road, scouting for drifts and bandits. Royce's cavalry rides vanguard. Tormund's wildlings guard the flanks. The queen and her guard will fly to Winterfell at noon to reassure the garrison. No fires tonight. March until the moon sets. We reach the last river by dawn and Winterfell by second sunset." He met each leader's eyes. "That is the direction." No one objected. Plans set. They dispersed. The march began with ordered precision, but within hours, the column stretched raggedly across the frozen plains. Vale lancers cut a narrow path through waist-high drifts, hooves pounding packed snow to slush. Behind them plodded battered footmen, shoulders hunched beneath mismatched furs, spears and pikes slung across backs to keep hands free for balance. Gendry's makeshift carts creaked under barrels of pitch and bundles of dragonglass, wheels reinforced with iron runners to slide rather than turn. Jon rode beside Arthur Dayne near the front, ghosts ranging ahead in silent leaps of white over white. The sword of the morning kept Dawn sheathed, yet even hidden, the blade's presence emanated through the air, a featherweight press against the heart that reminded any who came near of the previous night's miracle. Men glimpsed Dayne and whispered prayers, some in the tongues of old first men, some to the Seven, some to the Lord of Light now that they'd seen ice demons and dragonfire in one breath. Arthur accepted none of it. He rode with head high but gazed distant, as though searching an unseen horizon. Midway through the march, Daenerys descended on Drogon to confer. Snow whirled from the downdraft. Men ducked beneath raised shields. Horses reared and snorted. She leapt lightly to the snow, fiery eyes alight with purpose. "Rhaegal tires," she told Jon. "His wound festers. We'll press on, but I must ground him near Wintertown for the healers. Can your sister's maesters handle dragonflesh? We have old scrolls on direwolf care, Jon said dryly. Dragons are not so different. Flesh, blood, bone. Gendry forged dog's armor once. Perhaps he can forge a splint for a dragon rib. Dayne. Daenerys tilted her head, studying his deadpan. Then her lips curved, small but true. A jest from the king in the north. Mark the date. Jon almost flushed. Humor felt alien. He changed subject. Many northerners distrust Targaryens. When you land, keep Drogon outside the walls. Let the small folk approach on their own terms. I am no conqueror here. That is exactly how you must appear. His gaze softened. They'll see the truth in time. She touched his elbow, firm gauntleted fingers squeezing once. I trust your people. Turning to Arthur, she inclined her head. Sir Dayne, fly with me. The sight of dawn beside a dragon may ease fear. Arthur bowed. Dawn serves the realm. He dismounted, handing reins to a squire, and walked to Drogon without flinching, though the beast's black eyes narrowed to fiery slits. He rested a gloved palm on the scaled foreleg, whispered a word in Valyrian. Old tongue came easily, heritage from Starfall's Dawnfall Keep, and Drogon snorted but lowered a wing. Soon they were airborne, wings beating, Rhaegal and Viserion trailing. Snow devils swirled in their wake. True night fell fast. Clouds covered the stars, and the pale half-moon disappeared behind veils of icy mist. The column pressed on, torches hood-capped, boots crunching rhythmic but weary. Vale scouts returned with news. The King's Road ahead narrowed where a ravine had filled with drift. They would detour through sparse pine stands for easier traverse. Jon trusted Royce's judgment and signaled the vanguard to veer west. The detour led them through an ancient forest of towering sentry pines whose needle-laden branches formed a tunnel roof. Snow muffled all sound. Breaths fogged lantern light like ghost veils. Somewhere in the dark, an owl hooted. Echo, echo, then silence. Jon felt unease coil. A rasping cry shattered the hush. Wildlings farther back shouted alarm. Jon kicked his horse and galloped rearward, Ghost sprinting ahead with uncanny speed. He arrived to find a cluster of Stannis' men circled around a shadowy form in the snow. Lanterns revealed a corpse rigid against a tree trunk, eyes wide with frost. Not blue. Dead of cold. Gendry shoved through the ring, grim. He lagged behind, tearing pitch barrels. Too slow. Cloaks too thin. Then Tort. Jon crouched, shaking head. The man's lips were cracked, nostrils ice-crusted. He must have stumbled, sat to rest, never rose again. Another casualty, not of blades but Winter's merciless embrace. Tormund stomped up. We can't keep pace like this. Footmen wilt. We can't stop, Jon said, though guilt pricked. If we stall, many more will freeze. He ordered torches redistributed, cloaks loaned, horses rotated. Morale sagged, but the column pushed on until the horizon paled into pre-dawn lavender. At last they reached the last river. Its surface was a sheet of white. The current slowed beneath ice, but audible. A deep gurgle, as if the earth muttered in sleep. An old wooden bridge crossed, railings draped with icicles. Royce's engineers inspected, deemed it sturdy for foot, but not for the heavier carts. They spent 4 hours constructing sled rails and skids. Dragons might have made crossing moot, but the beasts were miles ahead with the queen. Jon helped lash ropes until his gloves soaked, but when he paused, he noticed Arthur Dayne among the workers, directing knots, hauling beams, dawn ungirt. Every man who saw him found energy. The bridge held. They crossed single file, shivering as wind off the water-cut skin like broken glass. On the southern bank, Jon glimpsed a rider on the ridge, a Winterfell outrider waving a blue pennant. Relief surged. He spurred his horse forward to meet the scout. The boy, no older than 15, breathless with excitement, saluted. Lord Snow, the queen arrived. Winterfell stands ready. They built pyres east of Wintertown for the wounded giants. Dragons lit them. His eyes were wide still. Never seen anything like it, my lord. Half the town watched, cheering. Nah. Jon managed a tired smile. "Thank you. Ride back and tell Lady Sansa we'll be there by dusk. And tell her I'm bringing all of winter." He turned back, signaling advance. Spirits lifted. They could almost smell hearth smoke. Winterfell's towers appeared through gauzy snowfall near the second sunset, silhouettes hard as nails against a bruised sky. New banners flew. The Stark direwolf quartered with a flaming red three-headed dragon on black. Both emblems bled together where wind pressed cloth, suggesting not rivalry but shared purpose. On the outer walls, archers stood in neat ranks. Below, villagers gathered along the rutted track. Children perched on shoulders, market women clasping reed baskets, farriers leaning on hammers. They had heard the tales, dead kings of ice shattered, dragons soaring, and they waited to see these legends in flesh. Jon rode at the head of the column through Wintertown's muddy slush. The smell of warm rye bread hit him first, carried by oven vents. He had not tasted fresh bread since before the siege. Ghost trotted at heel, muzzle flecked with rime. Men and women bowed or curtsied or simply stared in silent awe. Near the broken tower, arched two figures waited. Sansa in thick white fur, auburn hair unbound beneath a circlet of slim iron, and Daenerys in black dragon-scale armor, cloak furred at the collar, silver braids gleaming. Between them stood Bran Stark in his wheeled chair, eyes wide and strangely clear. Arya perched atop the wall behind, needly at her hip, a grin tugging her lips. Sansa stepped forward as Jon swung down. She embraced him fiercely. "You made it," she whispered against his ear. "All of you." "Most," he corrected softly, thinking of frozen corpses on the pine trail. But he squeezed her shoulders and allowed himself a moment of contentment. Daenerys inclined her head. "Your march was swift." He nodded. "The living move quicker with death at their heels." Arthur dismounted, Dawn strapped across back. Bran's gaze fixed on him. "Sir Dayne." His voice was distant but calm. "I dreamed you standing in this courtyard before you arrived." Arthur knelt, head bowed. "Sir Bran, I owe a debt to your father's honor. I pray my presence does not shadow his memory here." "Bell." Bran's lips curved faintly. "Memory is not shadow, it is lantern." "Welcome to Winterfell." Sansa gestured to the open gate. "Come inside. Fires are lit, broth thickens. Lord Manderley's cooks prepare more bread than I thought possible." She cast a wary glance at the carts laden with dragon glass. "And our cellars can hold these shards until we decide their form." Tyrion strode forward, stamping snow off immaculate boots. "I recommend spearheads, sword edges, and whichever peculiar project Gendry invents next." He flashed a quick grin at the smith. "Perhaps a dragon glass hammer for the king who will not be king." Gendry muttered, cheeks coloring. Sansa's eyebrows lifted, then she guided them through the gates. Inside, Winterfell hummed with controlled frenzy. Unsullied filed from ships anchored at White Harbor had already marched north. Their immaculate ranks now erected winter tents across the outer bailey, drilling spear thrusts in cadence with the Vale Knights. Dothraki scouted the nearby woods on shaggy northern horses. Strange seeing them cloaked in furs rather than silk but still fierce as hungry cats. Northmen worked alongside them under Manderley's direction, digging new trenches and reinforcing walls. Dragons roosted outside the curtain wall on wooden platforms, braced with whole tree trunks. Drogon lay like a hill of iron, eyes half-lidded, while Rhaegal's side was bandaged with canvas soaked in tar and herbs that steamed in the coal. Maester Walken and Missandei clambered over him with vials and poultices. In the great hall, long trestles overflowed. Barley stew thick with carrots, roast mutton, pickled beets, apples preserved in honey. Jon ate in silence, savoring each bite. He noticed Tormund teaching Unsullied a bawdy northern drinking song. The eunuchs nodding slowly as they deciphered the humor. Arya challenged a Dothraki Arak master to friendly combat using blunted blades. Sparks flew, and the hall erupted each time she scored a touch. Above the din, Daenerys and Sansa conversed at the high table, words lost in clamor. But the tone measured. Arthur Dayne stood sentinel behind them, Dawn leaning against a stone pillar. As the meal waned, Bran's chair was wheeled forward. His voice, when he spoke, rang with soft authority that cut through chatter. "The realm stirs," he began. "Cersei Lannister regathers her banners. Euron Greyjoy's kin raid the Arbor and the Shield Islands. The Golden Company landed at Old Town 10 days past, flying the Lion Rampart beside the Harpy of Volantis." Murmurs rippled. Tyrion's face darkened. News had outraced ravens. Bran lifted a pale hand. "Yet rivers of favor flow north. The Blackfish leads 4,000 from the Riverlands along the Trident, answering Sansa's call. Dorne's Princess Arianne sails north with spearmen to repay her father's oath to dragons. Even the Reach splinters. Lord Tarly's sons quarrel, and the common folk whisper that winter queens will bring bread where golden lions bring ash." Daenerys rose. "Then we march in the first thaw, when roads soften but before rivers flood. While we prepare, we must weave one banner from many threads. The lioness in King's Landing will exploit every fray." Royce stood. "The Vale rides with Stark, as always." Manderley nodded. "White Harbor will supply ships, grain, and silver." Gendry swallowed and pushed to feet. "Storm's End may rise for the Queen, if she'll accept a bastard's oath." Daenerys inclined head gracious. Tormund banged fist. "Free folk fight the foe that threatens good hunt and good mead. South or north, makes no count of walls." Sansa met Jon's gaze. "House Stark will follow wherever the king in the north leads." A hush settled. All eyes pivoted to Jon. He felt weight heavier than any cloak, heavier than Longclaw. He rose, pulse drumming. "I was chosen by acclamation at the wall, not birth," he began. Voice steady but low. "I accepted because the North needed a voice. But the North is no longer alone. Ice and fire saved us. Ice and fire must guide us." He turned to Daenerys. "Last night we fought side by side, dragon and wolf. You are the rightful heir to Targaryen blood. But here, among my people, sovereignty is earned by sacrifice." He unfastened the small silver wolf brooch from his cloak, placed it on the table. "I will serve the realm. Call me warden, soldier, husbandman. It matters not. The living need no kings, only leaders." "Then?" A startled murmur swelled. Sansa's eyes widened. Arya shot to her feet. Even Tyrion looked momentarily speechless. Arthur Dayne's expression flickered admiration. Daenerys stepped forward. She picked up the brooch, turning it in fingers. "Titles are wind." she said softly. "But oaths are iron." She pinned the brooch back on Jon's cloak herself. "I will not take a crown bought with your people's doubt. We shall rule together until spring blooms. Call it what you will." Jon breathed. Relief. Something deeper. He nodded, voice rough. "Then we stand together." Applause began. First hesitant from Unsullied, then booming as Northmen slapped tables. Vale knights clashed sword against shield. Wildlings howled wolf spirits, Dothraki ululated. Firelight danced across faces flush with mead and belief. Later, after torches guttered low and heavy curtains trapped the hall's warmth, Jon found Arya seated atop the parapet outside, legs dangling into cold night. He joined, silence stretching comfortable. "You gave up your crown," she said at last, eyes on distant dark. "Was never mine." She smiled crookedly. "All of this never belonged to any of us, yet here we are holding it together with thread and spit." Jon chuckled. "And swords of fallen stars." She studied him, moonlight glinting in gray eyes so like their father's. "You trust the Dragon Queen?" "I trust what I saw. A woman burning her breath to save strangers." Arya nodded. "I trust her dragons to keep me warm at least." She hopped off the ledge. "Care for a walk?" Bran says the godswood feels different. They walked through quiet courtyards to the weirwood. Red leaves still clung despite frost, and the carved face wept sap that glimmered like rubies under lantern glow. Bran was there, chair parked near the pool's edge. Arthur Dayne stood opposite, hood thrown back, dawn unsheathed, and resting point down in soft snow. Bran gestured. Sir Arthur wished to swear an oath. Jon raised a brow. Dayne lowered to both knees before the heart tree, blade laid across palms. I served kings who died and princes who failed, but honor outlives men, he intoned. Before the old gods I pledge Dawn to guarding the blood of Stark and Targaryen united until night falls and rises no more. So witnessed by tree and raven. Jon's throat tightened. He knelt, placed hand atop the blade. Honored. Wind moaned through leaves, branches whispering ancient tongues. Bran's eyes rolled white, then cleared. They accept. Arthur rose. Dawn light not yet risen, yet his sword shimmered faint. He inclined, head to Arya. I shall resume your lessons at sunrise. Arya grinned. Try to keep up. Days blurred into a rhythm of preparation. Gendry's forge spat sparks day and night. Smiths from Barrowton and Torhen Square arrived to learn dragonglass folding. By week's end, the armory held racks of black-veined spears, arrowheads, daggers, even a few crude long blades stiffened with the glass. Daenerys unsullied drilled shield wall formations with Manderley pikemen, while Dothraki practiced mounted archery across frozen paddocks, their arrows trailing colored ribbons to mark trajectories. Rhaegal's wound healed under maester and healer care. His flights grew longer each day, breath warmer. Tyrion, Davos, and Sansa convened nightly councils mapping supply lines and messenger routes. Letters flew south on wings. To River Run, Storm's End, Sunspear. Even Old Town, where Samwell Tarly petitioned the Citadel for knowledge of wildfire stores, hidden since Aegon's conquest. Ravens returned with cautious promises, declarations of neutrality, outright insults. But for every closed gate, another cracked open. One morning a small column of riders bearing the trout banner of House Tully arrived. At their head was Sir Brynden Blackfish, face lined but eyes sharp. He greeted Sansa solemnly, clasped Jon's forearm, nodded to Daenerys, and petitioned an audience. In the solar he placed a sealed scroll upon the table. An agreement signed by Edmure Tully relinquishing River Run stores to the Northern Coalition and offering 2,000 seasoned archers. The Blackfish's tone carried steel. But if Freys hold the twins, supplies won't pass the Green Fork. We need that bridge. Tyrion tapped quill to lips. Lord Frey's sons died at Cersei's feast. The twins are led now by a grandson, timid as a fawn. A show of force may be enough. Then so. No, Arya said from the hearth where she whittled a stick to fine point. She raised dark eyes. We need a surgical strike, not a siege. Remove the weasel, open the gates. Jon met her gaze, understanding flickering. No faceless killings, Arya. She shrugged. Faces are tools. Like swords. Daenerys interjected. If the Freys pledge to me, they may keep their bridge. If not, Drogon will. She did not need to finish. Wildfire of imagination lit the room. The planning stretched long to the night. Maps grew cluttered with colored stones. Cups clinked. Logs spat sparks. Bran arrived near midnight with news. Oron of Bael. The Bard's clan had spotted Lannister outriders along the neck. Likely scouts. War brewed. 3 weeks after the battle against the Night King, the host marched south from Winterfell in 3 great columns. Northmen and wildlings under Stark banners, Vale and Riverland forces under Tyrion's meticulous marching orders, and Unsullied and Dothraki fanning wide east and west, respectively. Dragons flew patrol above, their shadows skimming snow like dark sails. Jon rode with Daenerys at center flank, Arya scouting ahead on a lithe palomino scarcely larger than a deer. Arthur Dayne walked often on foot, Dawn at his side, speaking with common soldiers, listening to their fears. On the 5th night, they encamped at Moat Cailin. The ruin smelled of rot and brine. Long ago it had been Ramsay's abattoir of flayed men. Now its mossy towers bristled with new watchfires, repurposed as sentinel posts. Fresh pine logs burned blue-orange, keeping marsh miasma at bay. Dayne stood with Jon on the parapet of the southernmost tower, watching the torchlit marsh stretch toward the neck. Fog crawled like pale serpents across reed beds, muffling frog chorus. She shivered despite fur cloak. "I fought slavers in heat so thick it melted armor," she murmured. "Cold seems kinder until it creeps beneath skin." Jon chuckled softly. "Cold keeps you alert." He glanced sideways. "You'll grow used to it as I did." She hugged cloak tighter, then changed tack. "Tomorrow we cross into Southron politics. Bendable lords, gilded tongues. I rode through Essos freeing slaves. I burned Khalasars, cut masters' throats. Yet games of courtesy still unsettle me more than war." "Dayne?" Jon smiled with no mirth. "Courtesy hides daggers." He sobered. "I spoke of trust. I'll stand beside you when we meet those lords. But remember, even allies have edges." Daenerys studied him. "And what edge do you carry, Jon Snow?" He met her gaze, steady. "Longclaw has two, both cut lies." She laughed once, a low melodic sound that drifted across rampart stones. "There is honesty in that." She sobered, fingertips brushing the carved gargoyle. "Tyrion believes Cersei will offer no open field. She'll warp the city behind wildfire caches and scorpions. Dragons may die if we rush. Then we starve her," Jon said. "Cut grain from the reach, fish from the Mander, water from the royal aqueduct. Use blockade sieges, no need to burn thousands of innocents." Her eyes glinted approvingly. "I prefer saving lives. Dragons need not be sledgehammers, they can be scalpel." Below them, footsteps approached. Arthur Dayne climbed the worn stair, snow-dusting hair. He paused, bowing briefly. "Scouts report movement near the Fever River," he said. "Black banners on gold. Lannister outriders. 200. They test our flank." Daenerys' jaw. "We expected it." Jon's brow furrowed. "We can't spare many to chase them." "I will ride," Arthur offered. 50 Vale Lancers and Tormund's fastest. Enough to shadow, drive them south, learn their numbers." Daenerys considered. "Capture if possible." Arthur nodded. "Dawn shines brightest when blood stays sheathed." He descended, cloak swirling. At dawn, mist swaddled camp. Jon saddled his horse early, restless. Ghost whined. The direwolf scented something off. Before long, a horn bleated from the western picket. Men scrambled, ceasing arms. A rider emerged from the fog. Arthur Dayne's squire, helm lost, face streaked with mud in panic. He nearly toppled from saddle before Jon caught the reins. "Ambush," he gasped. Sir Arthur surrounded. 50 against 500. West Ridge overlooking the Fever. Jon felt ice in veins. "How far?" The squire gestured vaguely. "Half-day fast ride. Davos, already armed, arrived. We can dispatch 200 Vale cavalry now, light and swift." Tormund barged up with shoulders bare beneath fur. "Make it 400. I want my axe wet." Jon weighed time. Arthur's small detachment would not last half a day. Dragons could shorten the distance, but Rhaegal still mended, and Drogon patrolled south. Jon made decision. He swung into saddle. "Arya, Tormund, 40 of the fastest riders come with me. Davos, send word to Daenerys, have Rhaegal ready if needed. We ride light, no baggage." Horses thundered west, through reed-saturated flats, hooves splashing stagnant pools. Fog lifted as sun climbed, revealing rolling scrub and low ridges. Smoke coiled black ahead. They crested a rocky knoll and saw the battlefield. A shallow bowl between twin ridges, slope studded with withered heather. In the bowl, Arthur Dayne and his 50 held a tight semicircle around a low stone outcrop. Barricades of dead horses and shattered shields forming a crude wall. Beyond, Lannister soldiers in crimson and gold surrounded thrice their number. Light cavalry with crossbows, infantry bristling pikes. Black banners with golden lions snarled in cold breeze, above which flew a curious device. A silver tower upon green, unknown to Jon. As they watched, The enemy surged. Arthur's line met them, veil lances couched, wildling axes glittering. Dawn flashed blinding white, carving a swath. But numbers pressed inexorable. Tormund growled, made to charge. Jon held him by collar. Wait. He scanned ridges. The enemy had placed archers on the heights, a trap. Charging downhill meant slaughter. He eyed the slope behind, dotted with boulders. We split. 10 with me to the left. 20 right with Tormund. Arya circles wide. Arya grinned, disappearing into scrub. Moments later, Jon signaled. Riders burst from ridge flanks like thunderbolts, plunging into enemy rear. Jon's group smashed archers first. Longclaw lopped a bowman's head. Ghost tore another's throat. Tormund's charge bashed into the main ring, axes sithing. Arthur saw the vanguard collapse and rallied, leading breakout. Dawn met pikes, shattered iron, severed limbs. He vaulted barricade, shoulder to shoulder with Jon. Blood sprayed like hot rain. Snow hissed. Enemy commander, a tall knight with green tower sigil, spurred forth, mace in hand. He swung at Jon. Longclaw parried, but jars reverberated. My opponent strong. Jon ducked second blow, answered with upward slash. Sparks. Suddenly the knight jerked as a slim blade punctured armpit. Needly. Arya danced away, expression flat. Knight toppled. Seeing their commander felled, Lannister men faltered. Jon bellowed, yield or burn. Some dropped arms, others fled. A few fought on until wildlings pulled them down. Soon the bowl stank of blood and offal. Jon dismounted, breathing hard. Arthur clapped his arm. You arrived sharp as sunrise. Couldn't let dawn fade. Jon studied him. A shallow cut bled on Arthur's cheek. He tore a strip of cloth, pressed it. You're bleeding. Not enough to dim light. They gathered prisoners. Jon questioned an officer. Sir Ronnet Connington, exiled knight turned sellsword. He revealed Cersei's plan to send small harassment bands to lure dragons into towers, fitted with giant scorpions along the Roserad. A fragment of a larger trap. Jon rode back grim-faced. At Moat Cailin, Daenerys met them at gate, worry shifting to relief at sight of Arthur alive. She listened to report, eyes narrowing. She builds traps, she said. Then we'll spring them on our terms. We feint with foot, flank with dragons after scorpions reveal position. Then, Indor. Jon ran fingers through sooty hair. Need better eyes. Bran? Bran's raven arrived that evening with guidance. Scorpions hidden in 3 keeps along Roserad. Hayford, Southhorn, Fellwood. Each manned by Sellsword engineer, Cortot Estar. Daenerys paced war room. We strike at dawn, 3 dragons, 3 keeps, concurrently. Surprise and speed. Unsullied cut ground garrisons afterward. Tyrion frowned. Dividing dragons risky. Jon stepped beside the queen. Not if Arthur leads ground at Fellwood, Dawnspear in hand. His men know him. Bend. Arthur accepted mission without hesitation. He would ride with Vale Knights again, Arya shadowing as scout. That night Jon slept fitfully. Dreams of snow-white screams, of a throne carved from endless ice. He woke before dawn, found Daenerys already armored, gazing east where sky purple. Ready? She asked. He nodded. And you? Always. She mounted Drogon. Rhaegal and Viserion rumbled approval as Arthur's contingent filed out. At sunrise, the dragons rose, streaking south. 3 streaks of living flame against morning blush. Jon watched until they dwindled, trusting fate to wings and steel. Days blurred into raids and counter-raids. At Fellwood, Arthur's strike was poetry. Vale Lancers charged while Arya slipped through postern, cutting winding gear ropes. When Sellsword crew pivoted Scorpion to target Rhaegal, the weapon jammed and Dawn's flash ended resistance. Hayford burned under Drogon's fury. Southhorn surrendered when Unsullied breached gates. Dragons remained unscathed. Cersei's trap foiled. War momentum shifted. Riverlords captured Maidenpool. Dorne sacked Tumbleton. Iron Islanders loyal to Yara raided Lannisport. Reports of poisoned wine casks in Red Keep circulated. Fear mapping illusions. But with victories came doubts. Supply lines stretched thin. Disease nipped camps. And whispers of the night, King's demise traveled south, emboldening traitors who no longer feared northern winters. In every council, Daenerys and Sansa juggled alliances like glass balls. One crisp evening outside Stony Sept, Jon and Arthur sparred in a makeshift ring. Longclaw clashing dawn. Crowds gathered, hushed, to watch legend teach living legend. Arthur guided, parried, corrected Jon's footwork with taps to ankle, all while speaking of nights long dead and battles long won. Sweat steamed from their cloaks despite cold. When Jon finally grazed Arthur's pauldron, onlookers roared approval. They clasped forearms, grinning. Later, sitting on an overturned barrel, Jon cleaned Longclaw while Arthur polished Dawn. "You improve fast," Arthur observed. "I learn from the best." Arthur's smile faded thoughtful. "The best die when luck falters. Ensure your luck." Jon cocked head. "How?" "Love," Arthur said simply. "And fear. Love roots you, fear sharpens." Jon considered Daenerys. Her fierce resolve, gentle smiles reserved for wounded men. How snow sparkled in her hair like starlight. He thought of Sansa's unyielding grace, Bran's distant wisdom, Arya's steel heart. All kept him rooted. Fear came easy. He glanced at Arthur. "What roots you?" The older man's gaze drifted to horizon where stars pricked velvet. A promise to a sister long gone. And the knowledge that blades outlast lives. Jon sheathed Longclaw. "Blades can break." Arthur stroked Dawn's pale edge. "Stars burn out too, but their light travels on, even after." In King's Landing, Cersei seethed. Ravens reported dragon raids tightening around capital. Bread riots in Flea Bottom. Gold cloaks deserting. Qyburn assured her scorpions multiplied. Wildfire caches stable. She ordered Euron to sail upriver with new towers on barges. Mobile scorpions to target low-flying dragons. Secret tunnels dug beneath the city to be flooded with wildfire if invaders breached. Meanwhile, Arya infiltrated the twins disguised as a washerwoman, replaced Walder's grandson's spiced wine with sweetened nightshade, opened postern for Blackfish's archers. The bridge fell without dragonfire. At Storm's End, Gendry faced lords of the Stormlands, hammer across knees. He spoke of snow giants and icy kings, of dragon heat melting walls. His sincerity, unpolished and raw, swayed them more than any decree. They swore fealty to Daenerys, raising black stag banners quartered with dragons. The realms south quivered, but spring remained distant. Snow still dusted crownlands. Crops failed, refugees thronged roads. Jon pressed Daenerys, "Blockade but do not burn." She listened, her temper tempered by his counsel. One night, Rhaegal returned from patrol alone. No rider. Guards found Tyrion unconscious in saddle, arrow in shoulder. Lannister assassins disguised as Taroshi merchants had ambushed. Tyrion lived, but pain drove him to fever dreams. Daenerys wept quietly, rage simmering. Jon held her near the hearth. "We will end her cruelty." Daenerys' tears dried, determination blazed anew. Spring's first fragile crocus pushed through King's Road mud 40 leagues north of the capital. Scouts brought blossoms to Winterfell camp for Bran. The lad smiled faintly. Said, "The wheel turns." Rumors spread. Wildfire stores had mysteriously ignited under the dragon pit, killing 600 gold cloaks. Cersei accused saboteurs. Smallfolk whispered vengeance of old gods. Fear eroded Lannister lines. Jon, Daenerys, Sansa, and Arthur convened at Brindlewood's tent. Maps now bore red circles around King's Landing. Haystack Hall, Duskendale, Rook's Rest, all allies. They planned final siege. Arthur proposed silent infiltration. Arya, Faceless men skills, slipped through sewers, open mudgate from inside. Daenerys countered with surrender appeal, broadcast by Raven and Herald. If refused, concentrate siege towers on Gate of the Gods. Jon balanced, urging caution. Give innocents chance to flee, then strike. Final plan blended all three. Ravens delivered ultimatum. Cersei executed envoys, heads on spikes. Refugees streamed out anyway, braving winter night rather than Queen's wrath. Ziga lines formed. Dragons destroyed Euron's river barges, flaming scorpions to melted slag. Unsullied stormed ramparts. Arthur led a dawn assault on Liongate, dawn-cutting chains. Vale Knights poured through. Arya opened Mudgate, crossbow gutting a guard who mistook her for scared child. Civilians waved white cloths, parted. In the Red Keep's throne room, Cersei waited in black velvet, crown of jagged silver, when Daenerys entered flanked by Jon and Arthur. She smiled thin. Behind Cersei, Qyburn held a jar of green wildfire. Fuse lit. Arthur's eyes narrowed. Dawn lifted. In one motion he hurled the blade. Milk glass blurred. Jar shattered mid-air, liquid flame splattering safe distance. Qyburn shrieked as green fire engulfed him. Cersei reached for hidden dagger. Arya emerged from behind throne, blade at neck. Jon stepped forward, met his sister's eyes. Arya's expression was cold, but pleading. Jon nodded. Cersei's reign ended in a whisper of steel. 2 moons later, fields beyond King's Landing filled with tents for the Great Council. Lords from every corner assembled. Blackfish of Riverrun, Arianne Martell with Dornish banners, Yara Greyjoy draped in sea salt cloak, Gendry Baratheon bearing Storm's End stag, Samwell Tarly representing Old Town, now freed of Maester shackles. Even the new High Septon, a gentle woman named Septa Isabel. Inside the ruined dragon pit, benches formed circles around a stone dais. Jon, Daenerys, Sansa, Bran, Arya, and Arthur stood together. Debate raged. Who should wear the crown? Many lauded Daenerys, breaker of chains, slayer of dead, liberator of capital. Others looked to Jon. Unity of North and South, modesty, valor. Gendry spoke for the Stormlords. Let them reign together. Arianne nodded. Yara shrugged. Storms sink ships alone. Tied together, they ride waves. Eventually, Bran's soft voice cut through. Why choose one sun when 2 light the day and night? Let the realm be guided by council of monarchs, dragon and wolf. So power tempts neither to tyranny. The proposal passed by acclaim. Thrones forged in dragon pit from melted scorpions and flayed banners. 2 simple chairs side by side, gilded only by sunrise. Daenerys and Jon knelt before the realm, swore oaths to protect. Sansa crowned Wardeness of the North, Bran named Lord of Magic and Memory to advise. Arya sailed west with Nymeria's pack and Dornish explorers in search of new realms. Gendry accepted title Lord Storm. Tyrion recovered, became hand to both crowns. Arthur Dayne? He returned Dawn to Starfall, handing blade to young descendant Edric, untested but brave. Arthur then rode east with a handful of volunteers, wildlings, knights, scholars, to the Shadowlands, searching whispers of a second moon's meteor, capable of forging more star steel. If ever darkness rises again, he wrote to Jon, let there be another dawn. Years later, bards would sing that when the dead rose and night nearly won, a sword as pale as morning cleft ice, and a dragon's fire forged peace. Children would touch frost-rimmed windows and imagine wolves howling with dragons overhead. And though snows still fell some winters, they melted sooner, for the hearts of men burned warmer, remembering the day 2 monarchs chose love and fear to root them, and the realm at last exhaled.